So Roberto, here we are. Thank you
Man,
so much for thanks so much for joining us, or me, or whatever this is. Um, it's
having
been it's been uh it's been a really long time since we've seen each other in person.
yeah, I was trying to remember that earlier today, and I'm not really sure when that was. I don't know if it was like one of the many times we've played shows together or not.
Was it? I think it was like in was it in Brooklyn, like in Crown Heights, randomly sometime? Um,
Maybe, maybe. I mean, we lived
I
right down the street from each other.
yeah. I feel like I would see you occasionally.
Yeah. But you're
Um,
a busy man. You're always somewhere. It was always crazy to know where you were because I was like, oh yeah, you live in Crown Heights, and you're like, yeah, but I'm actually in LA right now. I'm like, oh okay, and then you're like, oh no, I live in Flatbush now. I'm like, oh that's great. And you're like, no, actually I'm in LA, and I'm like, oh that's great. And you're like, actually I'm in
well,
Indianapolis now.
yeah, exactly. So I'm in Indianapolis. Yeah, but man, you're in Asheville.
And I'm in Asheville now, so
Yeah.
and it's
Uh,
it's nice. It's really nice. It's different. It's
yes.
calm.
Speaking of reinvention, which is the official theme of this conversation as part of this podcast, we pick out a theme and we each do an interview that where we loosely have a theme for each conversation. Well, we share a theme for each like what am I trying to say? We like three of us have a conversation with someone about reinvention. Three of us have a conversation with someone about creative voice. So our official conversation theme is reinvention, but it really doesn't matter what we talk about.
I like it. No,
But
it's
I actually think it's perfect for us, and for you especially. I think at this moment, it seems
definitely.
like.
Yeah, I'm fresh in it. I'm fresh in like the I just jumped in the water of reinvention. I'm wet. And it's
I'll have Chris, our producer, like throw a bunch of reverb on that word, like right as it.
I'm in the deep end right now, but it's cool. It's living in I lived in New York for 15 years. Previous to that I was in Atlanta, and and I hadn't made a big move um since then,
Yeah,
meaning moving from Atlanta to New York and then now moving
yeah.
to Asheville. I didn't know what it took to make a big move like that, to be honest. I thought it was gonna be pretty easy, and it was like emotionally and like physically. I mean, the physically exhausting thing was what I was anticipating, but the emotional like strangeness of the
Because of the disconnect, because
yeah.
of the disconnect from
Absolutely. Hold on, you just went into vocoder land.
New York, and the disconnect to.
Hold on a second. You're
Oh no, you went robotic. Yeah.
you
No,
we
I think
both
that was we both went robotic. That's okay. I think we're okay.
we're good now.
Uh,
Okay.
um, so you were saying it's like both the like leaving. Do you feel like you're losing New York? When I left New York, it felt like you can't lose New York because New York goes on its way without you. Like New York doesn't care about you at all, and that's kind of like its strength. The even the people that are there are like we were just saying, not really always there or not often there. And so even the sense of community wasn't really about the location so much that they live, so much as their connection to New York. Um, I felt like I could leave New York without too much, uh, like it wasn't too romantic to move to LA because in a sad way, because I felt like New York was always going to be there. You know,
Mhm.
do you feel that way?
Absolutely. I think in some form, I'm not. I, I thought about it a lot. I thought about it in the sense that it there was a lot that we had experienced there, and there was time. I felt like I was like in a different part of my life now, where I don't necessarily have any attachments to like feeling like I'm gonna miss something in New York right now. Like I
Mm,
feel like it's a good time to leave, and not so much about going back to old things there, but going back there to maybe um to just experience it like with fresh eyes, but just kind of like still detaching myself from it, you know. So I'm not
mm.
I, I know it's gonna be different. I know New York will always be there, but I think it'll be different every time I
Someone else's New York, kind of.
definitely. And
Yeah.
I think I realized that a few years ago from being on the road so much, and I was like, wow, I'm barely in New York at this point. I'm like,
Mm,
when I'm here, I'm just like seeing people like very infrequently, and then if that, like just kind of like doing nothing, you know, like not really
yeah.
like anything. And that was a big realization that I was like, wow, I'm not even living in New York. And
Right. Right.
kind of just like
You're paying rent. You're definitely paying rent in New York, but you're not really living in New York.
absolutely. So that
Yeah, that's the rub.
I think that's what I've been thinking about a lot. And even with this move, it made sense for us to kind of just like find a new way to live. And we just needed it too. We were ready for this new chapter and a new experience. And the world and the earth is beautiful everywhere. And we were
Mm,
living in Marfa for 7 months last year, and that really gave us the ability to experience the thing that we always fantasized about or talked about, meaning like, oh, well, would it be like, you know, in some like random town, you know, in the middle of nowhere?
100%. 100%. In fact, I was catching up on that pitchfork profile of you,
Hold on,
and learned about that. You went for residency. What? Can you hear me? You good?
you just went robot again. Okay, you're back.
That was a filter.
Okay.
That was a filter. Like my glasses. It's like it's virtual. Um, yeah, you're so caught up. I just caught up recently with that. I read that Pitchfork, not review, but Pitchfork profile of you, and learned about the Marfa story. How you and your partner had gone to Marfa. It was supposed to be for a 3-week residency, right? Something like
Like a
that.
2 week thing, yeah.
2-week residency, and basically you got stuck there, and you lived there for 7 months. Um, and how it sounds like in some ways it was uh, dismantling for maybe I read into it too much, but it felt like it was kind of like oof, like um, in the way there was for a lot of us, just like everything sort of was stripped away, and then it maybe was a catalyst for um, for considering a more permanent move um, ultimately to Asheville. Um, is that remotely
Yeah,
right?
for
Yeah.
sure. I mean,
And,
I think for us it was like experiencing that. For anyone, like everyone talks about it, but until it's like living in New York, you're not gonna know what it's like until you live there. And so like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny. I actually, in reading that, I realized that we have more things in common than I realized. Jen and I have a similar story where we actually came to Indianapolis to during her spring break to teach her at USC, and we came to be with a family member who was in his last moments of life, not COVID, but cancer, and we just didn't get back on the plane.
wow.
And that was March. It was March 14th. I remember because it was the day before the Ides of March. Um, March 14th of 2020, and here I am. I'm still here, and it's October 1st, 2021. It's insane.
Damn.
Yeah. So, and we had a similar situation where it was like everything was stripped away. Like I got on the plane with my Pelican case, my trash can Mac, and like my drives, and like 3 shirts,
Right.
stuffed in to like keep it like from jumbling around. And yeah, and so kind of like how you described where you were in that profile, it talks about how you just had this like kitchenette or something in your hotel room or whatever, and or your little apartment, and it was like that with us. Like suddenly we were living with your parents, and we just had like our little corner with our kid, like it was totally surreal, and we were just kind of stuck there. And I don't know if it's like it's kind of an overplayed sentiment, but man, talk about imposed restructuring, life restructuring,
Absolutely.
and I share a similar feeling to you, which is that like kind of always wondered, oh, what would it be like to live near family? We've never lived near family, and like you, like recently celebrated 20 years with my partner, and yeah, it's just like we never had that, and so yeah, so like I feel like I was like, as I was reading that profile, I was like, oh wow, we actually have quite a lot in common. We feel like maybe in some ways we're in a really similar place. Now I don't know if we're going to stay in Indianapolis. I don't know how permanent this is, but it's at least semi-permanent for now, and actually it's been really wonderful. Yeah.
That's awesome. See, that's great to hear, and I think that's like, it's not that something more that the people need to hear of more, but I think it's like the permission to know it's okay to be who you want to be in whatever city you're living in. And I think there's, as much as like New York has it gave me, it also like, it took equal parts. It's like it's not just giving, it's like it took a lot away. And so I think
yeah, that's a
there's
good point.
there's not the growth is, it's not vertical. and and I think what you said about feeling good there, that's like what we felt when we were in Marfa. We're like, wow, we're in this like truly tragic situation in terms of like the world and the globe, but we're like really lucky to be in this place that's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
Even
isolated by design.
Yeah, and we were just able to just like walk outside every day.
Yeah,
around.
I mean, honestly, that's why we left LA. I mean, why we didn't get back on the plane. It was like, well, we got a little toddler and we can't even like go outside, and it's LA, so we live in a small house. I don't think this is survivable for us. And we fortunately, we were very blessed and lucky to have an option. And we spent that summer living at Jen's parents' house, and they live on this little lake. And so Remy, our son, he lived outside all summer and had just had the most like splendid outdoor, nothing is wrong with the world summer. And I mean, that was our dream, was like, how can we make it so he doesn't know that the world is falling apart? It doesn't even catch a whiff of it, and yeah, so we were so fortunate. Not everyone was, but it was kind of like that with you and Marfa, maybe, which is that it took this like situational isolation, which you sort of in many ways had to luck into. I realize in context, so many lives, like, we're the fortunate ones in that way,
No, and we have to be really sensitive to the amount of folks that we knew back in New York, where it was like folks were just stuck in their apartments, and it was
like Rafiq, man, he was like, he would just talk about how like it's just so haunting for so long, like all you'd hear is just sirens,
yeah,
none of the life sounds, all of the death sounds, it's really, really so intense.
yeah, and it was hard to kind of like, it was weird because we were like, fuck, we're like actually in this, we were staying in the article that you read. There was, he edited some things out, but we were in this really, the first 3 months we were there, we were in this really amazing house with this beautiful kitchen, and like, so like the first 3 months were like
enchanted.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
were like, this is insane that we're like in this beautiful home.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah.
even like the hotel it wasn't terrible. It was just like, the
Yeah.
last months we were there, we're like, okay, so we have this we had this like mini fridge, and we bought a what's that called? Damn, what's the thing that everybody uses now to cook the
Like
pot?
a hot pad, like a hot.
No, the instant pot.
Oh,
You
I
ever,
don't know about that.
okay, so it's like a
Apparently, not everyone uses it, Roberto.
everyone who probably lives in New York.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true. I got a proper kitchen now, so
But yeah, so it was interesting, but it didn't really hit us a lot. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. So when you got back to New York, that's when you actually, is that when you started? So I should say you're in the process of releasing a new record far in. You've got signals. You got three singles out, including a new song and video, Naranja, which you just released. And that record, Far In, you were making. Did you made that in New York after you got back?
no, it was a
Or
long process. It was kind of like, you know how it goes. It's one of those
yeah,
things where you have like seeds from another
yeah,
lifetime that keep growing but grow slow. And
yeah,
and a lot of the songs started when I was finishing my last record, This Is How You Smile, literally happened while I was making This Is How You Smile, while I was finishing it. I was like, man, I can't wait to not work on this record anymore. And while I was finishing the record, I was like, I'm just gonna write a bunch of new songs right now because I don't even want to finish this. And
So
I wrote like
yes.
5 songs, and then I was like, yeah, this is ridiculous. I need to finish this record now. I just like wasted a
So
bunch of time.
finish finishing is so hard, man. And this is a story I always tell. But it's ba- basically what I do is it takes so long to finish something, and you have to suppress all your new energies that are coming through because you're still cultivating like those other seeds that are now full grown plants, but like they're but they're not totally finished growing, but you have all these other seeds you want to plant. So it's like you have to have so much discipline not to like go out and start planting other seeds and giving them the water. You know what I mean? That you plant. You gotta wait, and it's like so. I'm pretty disciplined about it now, and what I do, the way I get around it is that when I finish a big project, that's when I let myself just create with no like goal in mind, no deadlines, and I let myself start a new thing every day because I love the feeling of starting something new. For
Yeah,
me, that's like the most exhilarating thing is just like sitting down and beginning. It's like it's completely there's such there's nothing like that feeling. And
absolutely.
even on the second day, it's so exciting to go to back to something and then like yeah, build on it. That's a different feeling. So and once you start that process, you can never get new again. And so what I do is I like take all that pent up creative energy, and every single day for as long as I want to, I let myself start something new. I don't pull up the project from the previous day, nothing. I just like for 10, 20 days straight, I'll just do something new. And that's my reward for like having the patience to like to not do what you just described that you did.
Same here.
But
No,
so
I do that. I do that a lot too. I think I do that, and I got into such the habit of doing that. What you're talking about, where I couldn't name. I just name things the day and the year.
yeah,
So it's like
yeah,
I have months and
yeah,
days and years
yeah.
that are just
I started using next, like just next one, next two, next three, next four. That's how I started the Tomorrow's records. And literally the day after I turned in Brighter Wounds, I started Tomorrow's, and I got like 10 or 12 days in, and so that like within 2 weeks I had 12 starts. So
amazing.
which is probably why it turned out to be a triple record. um, but so like when you start, so you and I both had you you're very prolific. You and I both, we like have that in common, which is like it seems like we're constantly, turning from one project to the next, and even overlapping like you just described. Do you ever feel like, are you like I I catch myself asking, and maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Um, how am I going to change? What
Mm.
do I like? How is this one going to be different? Like almost taking with me the pressure of what I've done and using that, or letting it use me. I'm not totally sure. Do you go through that process? Like, okay, this one, and I don't mean like concept album versus whatever. I just mean like, do you feel that pressure to do something new?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's like buried in like the like that early foundation of curiosity, and like it's hard to kind of like polish that again when you were like super young and super naive in terms of like how to make something, and it felt like everything you did was new. You're like, what? I can't believe, you feel like you just discovered something that nobody else knew about until you learned, or until you meet
Yeah.
other artists, and I think that like is a thing I always try to find, that time that you discovered something that you felt like you invented, overdubbing. At least you know what I mean? Like you're
Yeah.
like that, something like that, I feel like is so it's so like invigorating, and I think that for me, that's, I know there's like a more complex level to that now, like where uh it's not just about something like that. It's like a cumulative processes, part of processes and ideas and techniques and stuff like that. But I think the thing that I've really opened myself up to the most to get to that place now is um letting go and trusting the people I work with more, and
Mm,
allowing them to kind of reveal a world that like I'm not even seeing in front of me, and trusting that like um letting go of whatever like I think is the way I think my idea should be, and letting um uh
yeah.
the outside influences kind of get in there, and then all of a sudden it's like I feel like I found uh, I found what I was looking for, like with what you're describing, like
Mm,
looking for something new, looking for a way to try to do something new.
yeah. Yeah, no, I can absolutely relate to that because, like Sunlux, which is my, primary project, obviously began as a solo project. And, um, when I met Rafik and Ian, it was the first time that I felt, um, I just was like immediately learning from these guys, and I was like immediately changing as a musician, um, just in their, just like having yoked with them like for performance, because at first it was, we were just creating, I was just, putting together a live band, but then it was like immediately these guys were like, I could tell that there was this like, oh, I could see so much more of the horizon, you know, and I was like, this should be a foundational change for me. And that was my first. I've always welcomed collaboration. I've written a ton of music for dance in particular, and so I have a lot of experience, and it's very natural for me to welcome the outside influences of like those outside of the music, um, aspect of the collaboration. But this was the first time where I was like, oh yeah, like like um, every suggestion or every perspective, um, from Rafik and Ian, I should I have every reason to value and consider, and I never really like had that with other musicians before. And so, yeah, I can kind of relate to that feeling you're having. I
When
think.
I was trying to get to like what you were saying, and I think that's how I get to that point, or that's when I feel like that now. I try to open myself up more and not feel so isolated and trying to like find that. an answer to, you know, like I wanna I feel like that's the answer to a lot of problems. And I think with music, it's helpful as much as like we get so caught up in at least I do. I get caught up in what I think how great my ideas might be. And most of the time I'm kind of doing the same thing over and over again. And I want to do something new. And I think doing something new is doing that.
You went robot again.
Got me? Am I back?
Yeah, I got you. But you went robot again. But it's okay. We've got the you've got the audio. So man, are you gonna, like, how are you thinking about touring now? Because I know you've been redesigning a life pace.
Yeah, touring is strange, right? I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
guys? We're not. I mean, I'm not gonna. It's, you know, the strangest thing is, and I think it's the most exciting thing about this is like every record previous to this, everything has been like, you got to have a tour. You're like on the road.
There's so many assumptions. It's like, this is the way it's done. You got to do this. This percentage of your time is this, and then this percentage of your time goes here, and then it's all like laid out for you. And this is what the label wants, and this is what, you know, your manager is telling you.
And you're already like, there's so much pressure to just accomplish all of those expectations, and you, it's all it almost feels like it's all built into all of it. And it's been kind of awesome to not have to be on the road immediately, like the day the album's ready. And so we're just playing one show in November, gonna play a secret show in October in New York. But
wait, you just said November. Is that because you said November at first, but then you said October? Is that because it's so secret that it's like potentially 1 month or the other?
No, there's a show in November in Miami as the album release show, or that's what I'm calling it. And then something we're gonna do in October that's a little bit more low key, not really like a show per se, but I'll perform some songs. And then next year, I guess we're booking a tour. It's confirmed.
Like TBD, right? Like but like what reality is gonna, you know, allow.
I think
we're in the same boat.
Everyone's like everyone just like was excited to just book everything they could this fall, and then like there was nothing to be able to do this fall, and then everyone's like canceling left and right now, and I don't know where that leaves everybody, but it's just like it all feels so confusing, and I don't really know. There's a lot to be said, and it's hard to
but COVID aside, like, I mean, which is hard to say because it's, you know, it's a governing principle of life now, or factor of life, but, you know, more on just like the spiritual life practice tip. You know, you've said that you want to do this record differently, you know, in the way that you in the way that you create and support it with touring. And I'm just wondering if you feel like this is kind of like the new you, and if it's like, if you feel like you're still high, or if you're free from that.
Say it again. You went robot on me.
Yeah. Do you still feel like you're like album cycle guy, apart from COVID's imposition on your life? Or do you feel like you're free of it, and it's, you know, COVID aside, you're, you know what I'm saying?
I think I do. I don't know what I don't know what I am at this point. I think the strangeness of this, and the most exciting, not the strange, the exciting and interesting part is like, up until this point in my career, I've I've only been making, I mean, I've always been making everything just to make the things that I make, and then I've been lucky to have labels that have like supported it and put it out. And I think working with 4AD, this is my first record with them. It's the first time I'm
Yeah.
working like a whole different like ecosystem of like what that is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
after releasing music for the past like I don't know how many years now, like 16 plus, it's so strange because there's so much nuance and depth, and there's so many people working on things, and it's really interesting. And so now I see what album cycle stuff is, where I wasn't really ever operating in it before. I was just kind of doing whatever the hell I wanted to and just releasing whenever I felt like releasing anything. And so something happened, and then an album happened, and then I was like, cool, I'm just gonna put out these songs here. I don't know, I'm just gonna do these things. And they would just, there wasn't a lot of strategy or planning. I wasn't like, okay, here comes this video and we're gonna do this to do this. And like it was just like, cool, I have this thing done, let's do this. And so now I see how much work and planning goes into so many just like parts of sharing an album. And I think it's awesome because there's so much work that we put into making these records, and kind of having like a counterpart to kind of work on, like have the energy to work on that aspect. And so for me, to answer your question, I don't know that I've ever been an album cycle person, other than just when an album comes out, I tour it. But everything else, I've been on the road. I think I was on the road since 2014 until 2019. I don't think I'd stopped. Constantly on tour. And so it was just always just like a flurry of things always happening, and nothing ever stopped. And so now I'm entering this like world in a completely different way with releasing records. And I hope this relationship with this label with 4AD is long lasting, because I think it's cool to have like this team, you know, and it's really exciting in that respect. And I could keep releasing music for the rest of my life. And
that was going to be my next question, actually, is you know, like, well, it's two questions, and it's a question these are questions I ask myself. It's like it's the 10-year question, which is, you know, what am I did 10 years ago? Am I doing something now that I 10 years ago would be? To what degree would I be thrilled? To what degree would I be disappointed? And then like the inverse, or the like a related question is, 10 years from now, knowing how fast 10 years goes by, how do I want to be? How do I want to be different? What do I want to be? Who do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? You have any meditations on those things?
What's your answer today? At least for one of those questions. You don't have to answer
so both. the weirdest thing is, like, I'm a dad now. So, and 10 years ago, I didn't see that coming.
Right.
So I actually think it's kind of impossible to answer the first part of that question, because, and maybe this is just a cop out, but so much of my life now is just really about him. And even my music and my career and everything is still like on a very day-to-day, like hour to hour way, completely like subservient to this, like, you know, being that I'm responsible for now in life. You know, that's like, that isn't me. Man, it's so I didn't see it coming, I think. But if I try to answer the question, I could say, like, well, if in 10 years from now, so if like I'm 42, so if like 32-year-old Ryan was like, okay, let's say you have a kid, you're like almost 5 years deep into being a dad. I think I would be, I think I'd be really happy with um, with today's Ryan and the work that I'm doing. And I would be very thankful that I'm doing it more within a community of creative people, and I'm less isolated in my primary work. I'm still actually very physically isolated, and actually being in Indianapolis, I'm more physically isolated from my peers. Um, but I'm more I'm I'm more collaborative and cooperative, and more experiencing the fruit and the pleasure of yoking with other creative people. And I think I'd be proud of that. I think 32-year-old Ryan would be happy about that. I want that to expand. Like looking forward 10 years, like I want to say that my creative family and just my life family, not necessarily like my blood, my family relations, but I don't really need to be making any more kids. But I want to see that grow exponentially. And I would love for this. I would love for today's Ryan to be a shadow, and like in comparison to what 10 years from now Ryan could be, in that regard. And hopefully catalyzing a lot of other people's creative ideas. That's become really, really exciting for me. Yeah, so your turn.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's really it's a lot of good intentions, and I feel like you've done that with even knowing you in respect to knowing going on tour with Son Lux, like early days,
Yeah,
but like
yeah,
when you had first really started working with Ryan and not Ryan, Ian
Rafik and Ian. Yeah,
and Rafik, and
yeah,
uh, and just knowing that there was that evolution of like there being a hired band versus like you maybe that was like an obvious evolution, but it's not always obvious. I mean, people can just have a band and that's it.
yeah, yeah.
I think that's like a big part of that change that you're talking about, expanding like your community and like supporting and becoming someone who can uplift other people's like creative ideas and cultivating that. I think you've already like done a lot of that. I feel like that's just going to keep growing on its own, it's like almost like you're expanding like the songwriting idea where like you're finishing an album and then you have all these creative ideas, we got to finish that. I feel like that happens with like the people that you're working with, you're like
True.
you're like, oh, let's do this, but I guess still got to finish this thing with you, but like there's all these other things
Yeah.
I'm doing right now. I think it kind of like keeps growing like that.
True. Very true.
But same here. I think like I yeah, 10 years ago, I'm 41, and 10 years ago, I think I was working on or maybe put out my second Helado Negro record, and like I remember thinking I was at a point of reinvention, to be honest. I didn't I knew I wanted it to be different than what I thought it should have been, or what I had made previous to that, and I was confused why. Like I was confused in general. I didn't know what was going on. I previously hadn't ever had experience with like working with like a label that would support me the way it did, like with Asthmatic Kitty, and like they were giving me like some financial support, and like it was just like all new. And I knew that I had the opportunity to have a platform to share my music, and like I knew at that moment I wanted something to be different, and I purposely made a record that was like void of like guitars and instruments. And I remember I had this like weird philosophical moment where I was like, I sold all my equipment. I had been collecting like all this like really nice analog gear and shit. And I was like, I'm selling all this shit. And I sold it all. And I was like, I'm just gonna start with like sine waves and square waves and triangle waves.
And you're OP1, right?
And then that was the year I think I got an OP1. The year
Yeah.
to that, 2010. I was like very like set on this feeling, and looking back on that now, it's kind of cool. I'm glad I went there, and I think just speaking about music, but as a person, I think a lot has changed, because I think I really wanted to be a part of so many projects and be creatively involved with so many things, to be attached to like that kind of growth. And what I realized through that was it just wasn't possible. Like I burnt out throughout that process, and I had to like stop. I remember there was too much going on. And so I think if I was looking back or looking forward, I would know that I would be happy, because I'm happy about making all these right decisions about like preserving and taking care of like and protecting my like time and energy now, and like how to actually be a little bit more helpful and useful if someone needs it. And I think that's like going forward, I want to like be more mindful of like how to like really slow down even more, and like absorb the things that I can, and like actually be a little bit more uh not so much an authority on things, but just be less of like a speculator on so many things. And I think that was like 10 years ago. Me was like so much like speculative like interest, and like doing whatever I could. And then now it's like, we'll just dig in and like do a couple.
That's cool. I was going to ask you if you just talked about selling all your stuff at one point. On the topic of reinvention, that's something that I've thought about for myself is, am I willing to abandon all my familiar tools in search of some deeper creative potential that my familiarity is keeping hidden, or my comfort with familiarity is keeping hidden. For example, I've always used the same DAW, and I know people who like float around between DAWs, and those people all say, "Oh, a DAW is a DAW," of course, but
it's a great bumper.
Yeah. But for me, I like literally, I can't even like, I don't even know how to like record enable a track in Pro Tools, like I'm just like I'm such a one DAW guy. And I've been using the same DAW since I was 15 years old. And I'm 42. So it's crazy to think about like moving to a different DAW, even just something so simple like that, even though in so many ways DAWs are similar. But like you get so adept at your tools, and you're making all these records, and you're pulling up the same plugins and using this, like pulling out the same like Juno or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm just like, riffing on this, idea of like everything changing on a dime, and then what do you do and what do you discover as a result, which, for both of us, that's been a thing. Like everything changed on a dime. Fortunately for us, we found ourselves in mostly favorable conditions. Thank God. But and in that context, we learned a lot about ourselves. We were able to reinvent, to change our way of thinking, to pivot. And I'm wondering if, as a creative person who makes things, if you ever felt tempted to do that again, to sort of like get rid of all your stuff and try a whole new set of tools, or have you been there, done that?
I do it often, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do it a lot. I do it as a practice. I think I do it. I keep things that are like, I have my MPC 2000 XL. I always keep it. I always have it ready to go, and and I try not to buy many things, and I try not to download that many plugins, and I try not to uh, go. I try not to buy too much shit, and I try
Yeah. Yeah.
to whenever I hit a brick wall, I have like exercises that I use, like creative exercises that help
Yeah.
me get somewhere, but not looking at a computer. Sometimes on a computer, like sometimes on the MPCs, sometimes just I have these basics for sure, but I use them as a way to not as crutches and not as like familiarity, but as places to things to use for places I haven't been yet. And even silly things. I remember I used to do this thing. This is like such a really funny thing, but this is how like rudimentary I'll get with things, but like with this is like my guitar. I'll take my guitar and I'll just put a capo on the first fret, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write 5 things with the capo on the first fret, and then the next day I'll put it on the second fret, and I'm gonna write 5 things, and then by the end of the week, you know, I'm like, oh, cool, like I actually there's this one thing that I really liked when I went there.
Yeah.
And it's these moments, and so then I'll do the same thing with like my ARP Odyssey. I've had this thing since I was like 19 or 20. I'm like, cool, this thing has got a square wave, you know, like I'm just gonna open just a square wave and just listen to the square wave and work with it. And these are all things that exist with what we're doing. Every single tool that we use has all these basics in it, and so there's nothing. Just like how can you assign yourself like these exercises that are gonna like reshift your process, because it's like you could buy all this new stuff, but it's like all the stuff is all the same things that you already have. It's like it's in a different format, and it's just gonna, but it's
an easy lie. I mean, it's an easy lie if you feel stuck, or you just feel, you know, you got your paycheck and like you just like feel like, okay, now I'm going to be able to make a great new beat because I'm going to go buy this, like, you know, $69 plugin or something. And you know, that may be true, but but it certainly isn't the only way to go about it. I'm actually like I'm a minimalist to an extreme, and it's actually something I've discovered about myself, and it's something I want to change, which is that I've let a philosophy of minimalism become like a fetish.
right.
And so and I've always been proud of like the number of things that I could do with very little. But I've gone overboard, and I've let myself be closed off to certain new tools that could expand my potential. Like just because I don't like, it's like it's a prideful place, really. In my spirit, it's like me saying like, oh, I don't need it, you know. It's like, well, that's one question, that's one way of thinking about it. Like, could it help you, you know? Never really entered my mind, you know. And so I'm actually like kind of on the other end of the spectrum. A lot of people, you know, I think of me as an electronic musician. It's like I've literally never owned a hardware synth. I've never owned I'm a beat maker. I've never owned I've never owned an MPC or anything like it, you know. I'm sitting in front of a weighted action 88 key controller that I recently got. I finally upgraded to a weighted action, even though I'm a pianist and I've been playing the piano for 35 years. Like I've just been such a deep, like crazy minimalist. And one of the ways that I'm trying to reinvent myself is to allow myself a more dignified creative environment. So like I've like been in the process of like making this room better, because it's a temporary room for myself, something I'm renting. Now I'm in Indianapolis, I don't have my own place, but I'm in the process of like making this, got it filled with plants and good lighting, starting to like, you know, create a dignified place to work that like where I feel like it can have respect for my environment. And then like do things like buy a cool rug, you know, like and you know what I mean? Like,
Baby steps.
yeah, baby steps. But honestly, for me, it sounds silly, but it's actually a huge change in my like, get crazy glasses. Like, I'm wearing crazy glasses just because, like, what if I just want to wear crazy glasses one day, you know? And that's
They're
kind of
great.
where I'm
They
at.
look great on you, by the way. You went robot on me. Just
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, dude. Oh man.
it freeze frame.
Oh, you froze again.
You
I think you froze again. You.
We both
Oh,
we
it's, you know
both
why?
froze at the same time.
It's because Michael's sending me. It's because Michael's sending me text, and it makes my phone go. It's Michael's problem. It's Michael's fault. Well, I've eaten up a lot of your time. I wanted to give you a chance to
I wanted to say
maybe
something
share.
based on that. Hold on.
Oh yeah,
What we're talking about in terms of, and I like that. I think that's amazing. There's a lot of people I know that did or do what you've done in terms of like stick to a certain like ethos of like working. And I think something that really clicked for me not a long time ago, but a few years ago was I was so dead set, like during that time 10 years ago, I was so dead set that everything that I wanted to do could be done in my room, in my studio, at home. I didn't need all these other things, like just kind of speaking to your, like, I feel like we have that in common. And I was like, there's no need for me to go anywhere else, you know? And I slowly learned how important creative spaces are and how important it was to have an actual creative space, and how that was not to kind of like, you know, like chime in. I mean, I want to drop this, but really to reinvent yourself is going to studios, like real studios that are these spaces made for what we do.
Yeah, purpose-built.
And experience it with other people who can operate it in this like real like in this real like functional kind of like, you know, specialized way. Yeah. And it was amazing. It was eye-opening. I'm like, wow, this is really important, actually. Like, it's important to know that what you do at home is valid, and for people who don't have that access or privilege to like have access to those spaces, but for them to know that, to not be so hardline about saying like those spaces aren't valid either. You know what I mean? Like, some people on like one side say like, these two things are like invalid or whatever, but I think it's there's something about designating these creative spaces and really harnessing them to be like, this is my creative space, and how it can actually grow more into not just something that like feels like you're doing it to defy like what people have said, like this is the way to do it, but it's more like, no, all these spaces are dope, and like you can make some shit you've never made before, you know? And I think that blew my mind. Like, I forgot, it was pretty early on. I went to some studios, but it wasn't like, I wasn't thinking about it like that when I went to these other studios. But there was a studio I went to in Atlanta, and I was just like, damn, like this is amazing. We're just like, there's just a flow, and it doesn't even matter if we're making anything right now. It's just like, it felt like we were just really tapping in, and that felt so important.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think we can do that with space, like temporal space as well, you know, time space. We can treat time sacred, create windows of time. Also space, like thought space, can protect our thoughts, and that's really hard as a dad for me. That's the thing I've felt like has actually been the biggest challenge for me, is like not constantly being divided and like occupying multiple spaces at once.
I bet.
Yeah, it's it's basically impossible. So it's a good challenge, you know.
Going back to, man, one more thing, going back, I know we're like running short on time, but going back to
no, I mean, I'm cool. I just want to respect your time, you know.
Well, going back to the Marfa thing, the really interesting thing about Marfa was like we would drive like 30 minutes or 20 minutes outside of Marfa, and then you have no reception. And then you're like, well, we're going to this place that's an hour and a half away, so we're not gonna have reception for the next like 5 hours. So it's like it would be like these kind of journeys where I think that was really special to understand that relationship with the person that you're with. Like for me, it was I was with Christy, and it was like it was a really cool time because of that. Because like
Yeah.
all of our options of
Yeah.
doing things weren't even options. It was like
Yeah.
no phone, 5 hours to the nearest city to catch a flight. There's no flights. There's no rentals. There's no nothing.
Yeah. There's no safety in Airbnbs and hotels.
There's no money. It's just
There's
like,
no money.
it's just like there's no shows, there's no income. It's
Oh,
there's no
God.
nothing. It was just like, well, this is what's going on. This is it. And I think that's part of like a creative philosophy too. It's like you put yourself in these spaces, whether they're minimal or not, and like all of a sudden you're presented with all these options, and like you're doing something and you're into it. And I think it kind of like bleeds into whatever you want to make or whatever you're open to making.
Yeah. And you know, that's actually kind of clarifying for me. It makes me realize that what I'm wanting to do in my life is not necessarily at all get more tools or get more space or get more um even opportunity. It's what I actually want to do is be um more artful um in all aspects of my life, choosing with intention that I would normally and very intuitively bring to music. Choose you apply that same kind of intention and care to all the other stuff, you know. And that's I was living a really divided, and I still am, but my I realized about myself, and my manager Michael and his wife, you know, Liz, helped me realize this, you know, like they not even trying to, just talking to them, it wasn't even they were trying to like, you know, counsel me on it or anything, but I had this realization. It was actually mostly with Liz, who came by the studio to help me with something, and after she left, I had all these like epiphanies, and I realized that I was really thinking differently, passionately differently, about all these different aspects of my life. Um, when really what I what I should do is bring the same sort of care um, and focus and scrutiny and adoration that I bring to music. I should be doing that in every piece of my life. I don't need more pieces of my life. I don't need more things to do. I don't need more tools in the studio, but maybe I do need to think about my tools and think about my furniture and think about my, you know, plants and my lighting, like with the kind of like reverence in a way that I have for my craft making music. And like, and certainly I should be doing that more with respect to my family life, you know, like centering, um, like thinking of my family is not the thing that I experience after, you know, a day of making music.
Mhm.
It's like, no, like the whole day is making art, you
Mhm.
know, the whole day is making art. It's like, how can I be artful as a parent, as a husband? How can I be artful as like even if I'm at Lowe's, you know, like how can I be artful in like what, and you know what I mean? Like, was it
I've
Lowe's?
read,
Lowe's today.
yeah, and I respect that a lot. It's like one thread for sure. This is a little tangential. Man, I can't say this word sometimes. Tangential. Um,
That's
but
right. That's good.
I read there's a really good writer I like, and they wrote something that that uh that I really dug, which was like I said, it's a little tangential, but it how did she write it? She wrote like treat everyone that you don't know as if they're having the worst day of their life. And I
Mm,
think I think it's like kind of like it's a feeling like you're with everything that you're doing, you're like have more openness, and I guess it's empathy, but I think
Yeah.
that's something that's a thread that runs through, like, I think what you're talking about too. It's like you kind of like you got to care about yourself in an
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
way, and care about like all the things that you got involved in your life in a way more open way, and not so like, and that's hard. That's hard to manage.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think it's easy to kind of memify it, but I think some folks don't realize that shit might take like 10 years until you're like, oh damn, I feel like I actually have a grasp on like how to do this. And I feel like that for myself, going back to your 10-year question, like I feel like I'm in a place where I'm like way more understanding of like the things I'm doing every day than I was before. I was like way more divided. I was way more like, this happens and then I'll do this, and it
was that impact, and that empathetic posture is like, if we can learn to be more empathetic toward others, then like I feel like that's a gateway to being kinder to ourselves as well. And I think a lot of us have, some people it's easier for them to be kind to themselves, and other people it's easier to be kind to others. And it's not one or the other a lot of times. And actually, one of the things that had happened, as I thought about, as like right before I started having all these epiphanies, is there was a dear friend of mine they were going to come, two friends were going to come here to Indianapolis to work on some music for like 10 days. And my space, like the walls were like puke yellow. I had like this white drop ceiling, like terrible lighting, like all this like old like acoustic stuff from Michael's basement. Everything was like, I didn't have any extra chairs. Like I got one of them was like off the street or whatever. And I and I had been so like, and I was like, oh man, this is not a good, this is no place to work all day long, like to create all day long for 10 days straight. And a few days later, and so I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do? And it was just originally why I asked Liz to come over. But then it was like, just to kind of help me think about what I could do. And it dawned on me right after she left, is like, I was saying that this was not a good place to create for 10 days straight all day. And I had just spent 10 months all day, every day creating in this space.
Wow.
And it was just like, why was I know this to be true, and it's something I intuitively thought about and applied to my friend Nathan and Katie. Why wasn't I kind enough and have enough respect for myself? Like, why did it take thinking about other people seeing it and being here for me to like be like, yo, like, no, this is terrible. Don't do this anymore. This is within your control to do something about. And I realized everything about this space that was really hard that's really hard to come by if I tried to find it. Cheap rent. No, I don't have any shared walls. I have my own HVAC control, which, as you know, with audio is like essential. You got to be able to control your own HVAC. I got no one above me. I got no one below me. I'm well positioned in the building where I'm not making any, like, nobody, I can't hear anyone. They can't hear me. Those are like really hard things to find in a rental, and I have them. Meanwhile, I've been thinking for so long about all the things that I didn't like about this space. And you know what? All of those things were entirely within my control to do something about.
Right.
And then it was just like, boom. It was like, oh, I just had like, and so that's why, like, partly why I'm like in this. Am I frozen?
No.
Okay, good. Because I just got a text. So that's like, get frozen. It's partly why I'm like in this. I think reinvention is like where I'm at right now. And why like this conversation is a good time to have it. And it's nice to, it's obviously been and it's been a good excuse to connect with you again too, which is awesome.
You are blowing my mind right now, because I think Chrissy and I have had similar conversations initially when we got here, and then our situation here is so great in comparison to Brooklyn, and just great in general in comparison probably to anywhere. And I think initially you focus on all these things that you're just like unhappy with. We're renting here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Right.
it's a funny thing how that can be such a like default mode, and with spaces, and then I was like, I feel like a couple months in.
Yeah,
that's what's that? Hold on, you broke up. What do you think?
I heard. I got you.
But now I feel great, and I feel amazing. I feel like this space is like the best space ever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, man. I feel very similar. I feel like my default mode was to have disdain for this place, and even this like little moment of time, because I really want to build my own studio.
Right.
And like rather than having a posture of like gratitude and recognizing this thing, like this particular moment, this particular space as a blessing, I let my default mode be that it was like I let myself have disdain for a blessing.
Yeah.
And I'm right. So right now I'm like, no, I'm done with that. I'm done with that shit. I'm like, and like, where else am I doing that in life? Let's make sure like I don't do that anywhere else.
I think it's also fair, because I think part of it is because we know so many possible outcomes at this point in our life, and meaning that
yeah,
your possible thought process is like, I'm renting this space, I'm going to put time, money, and energy into making it be my place, and then all of a sudden next week the landlord's going to be like, hey, actually we sold the building, you're going to have to move out in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And knock on wood, I'm sure that's not going to happen, but I think it's like something that so it's
and I think it also comes with being a New Yorker for so long, and being like living in Los Angeles for so long, being like a consummate renter and a coastal person, like you just and like someone with the like kind of like with all the default, like you were saying, the default modes, to just not settle, and to like don't invest too much in this space, because emotionally or otherwise, because your landlord could like come knocking, like that kind of thing. But I've missed out. I feel like I missed out on some like really like wonderful energy, and I'm feeling positive about it though, because I feel like, well, better to have learned it when I have, and to be doing something about it now, than still not having learned it. So I am thankful for it, for the experience.
You're inspiring me right now, because I think there's like more I can be doing now. So
yeah,
great. I love it.
Awesome. Well, man, thanks for taking so much time and hanging out with me. This is so cool to do. Like this podcast series has been a very cool experience to like basically have have an excuse to like reconnect with a lot of folks, or connect for the first time with a lot of folks. So I'm just thankful that we've gotten together again.
Me too, man.
Yeah, and man, blessings to you, and Christy in Asheville, and I guess we'll cross paths either there or somewhere else. Maybe you're not touring, but we will. So I think when we blow through, we'll have to connect for sure.
For sure. I'm sure we'll see each other sooner than later, man. And
awesome.
Likewise, love to your family and all the beautiful things y'all are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks
man.
for having me. I'm honored.
Yeah, absolutely, Roberto.
Okay.
See you, buddy.
Later, man.